Great day, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the Strategic Possibilities Show, where we discuss success and growth to help you launch potential in your personal and professional life. My name is Emmett Ferguson, and I am your host. And today, everybody, you're in for a really fun show. I'm with a friend of mine, April Kissinger, and she is in STEM. She's a woman in STEM, and she is an artist as well, and incredibly creative. And I thought it was so interesting how we met, because I think it really shows the power of the internet and social media, and that message of, if you see something cool on social media, something that's artsy or creative, like her Miss Creation Nation figurines and stories, to message them and just to see what it's all about. And April and I, when I had messaged her, ended up creating like a stop motion video. So, thanks for connecting and giving me an opportunity to do that. That was so fun. And just so the audience knows a little bit more about Miss Creation Nation, I think it's a great combination of like science and, someone who pursued their artistic passion as well. Can you give us a little bit more like about your inspiration for Miss Creation Nation?
So it started about when I was 20, about 16 years ago, when I was working at a call center, and they gave us little sheets of paper to write notes down on. And while I'm waiting for calls, I would just doodle little creatures on them and write stories on the back. And so I had about 100 or so of them, and I kind of let that go by the wayside after I left that job. So fast forward about 13 years or so, and I decided to start doing art again. I had done art a little bit every now and again, but it's something that I always felt was, it's always so daunting to think about. And I don't know why. I've heard that from a lot of people. But once you begin, then you realize it's actually something that's an amazing thing to have in your life, if that is something that interests you. And so once you start and you get past that huge barrier, which I don't understand why it exists, but once you get past that huge barrier, then you can express yourself in so many different ways. And so it started out with just these creatures that I would sculpt. And I really liked sculpture for a while. And so I would just sculpt these little creatures, and I would just create these interesting stories about them. But give it a month or so after I started, and I realized that I could actually, and I think it probably evolved from one or two of the creatures, and I realized, oh wait, I could use this to explain scientific concepts. And so I had a few creatures, and so some of them are actually not done yet. Most of them are completely are sciencey.
That's so cool. Sorry to interrupt, but that's so cool that you didn't start making them into scientific stories until a little bit further in. Because I thought you had started initially with the whole concept of making this into a science story.
Yeah, it actually did not start that way at all, it is funny that way. But now it is totally based on science, and it really, to me, makes science accessible to people of all ages. And what I do is, not only do I do like a story, but I'll do a poem, because I believe poetry is a way for people to really remember things and just hear them in their head. It's something that really sticks. It's like song lyrics, they stick in your head. And so if you go over something enough, then you actually get to learn it. And so it sticks in your head and it goes into your memory. And so you actually learn these different scientific concepts. And so I have different groups of scientific concepts. One of the things I have is the Facilitators of Physics, which tries to tackle different quantum concepts. And it's
Okay.
it doesn't really get too involved in the concepts, but really just kind of explains it on a very light level, so that people can look at it, because I think science is kind of inaccessible in a lot of ways to people, especially physics and quantum physics. People hear that and all of a sudden they shut their brains. And I've seen this happen over
That
and over
happened
and
to me
over.
just now. I was like, oh no.
and it's really funny, because a lot of it is very simple to understand if it's just put in the right way. It's just really hard to find out gain that knowledge. And it's something that even people who are in the science field have to tackle. I mean, physics in school was my hardest subject. And what did I do? I went and got a degree in physics because a teacher that I loved so much made physics super accessible by explaining all the concepts and letting all the students know in the classroom how it's applicable to their everyday life. So you can actually just like be walking down the street and be learning. You can just think about physics as you go throughout your everyday life. And I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah. And you
roundabout.
Yeah, and you do a great job of telling stories, because I remember the story that we did for the stop motion was about a symbiotic relationships with one of your creatures, and then hunter prey aspect of it. It was so cool how you came up with that story.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, and your voiceovers were really, really fun. I really liked all the cute little whistles you did. It was really great. That was really cool, and I thought that that would even more so like stick in people's minds with, you know, like a little video clip, and you actually get to see it in action and see how these things work. And because I remember it was thanatosis, and that's actually playing dead. I remember that was one of the concepts that was talked about within that. So that was really cool.
Yeah, that was fun. So, by the way, do you have parakeets? I have parakeets too.
I do not. I'm actually
Oh.
sitting outside, and there's a tree right here that's some sort of tulip tree, and
Uh-huh.
the birds just love these beautiful flowers. So yeah,
Nice.
there's just lots of birds that come through.
It sounds like they want to join in on the conversation, and it's cool. I'm just
Okay, cool.
observing. Yeah, it's awesome. I have parakeets that, occasionally they'll like chat with me and all that.
Aw, that's
Yeah. And you mentioned quantum concepts, and I definitely did. My mind did go like, "Oh, what's that all about?" And I think it's amazing that you were able to take physics as something that challenged you, and then you were able to dive into it. And I know you worked in some really cool physics environments. You had mentioned that you worked with lasers, and that sounds like super hush hush secret. What kind of technology was it?
So we were actually building high power research lasers for facilities across the world. The last one that I worked on actually is in Prague right now. It's not complete because it's a huge system and there are different steps to it. And the last step to, well, at least the lasers that we worked on is a compressor chamber, which compresses the pulse at the very end. And I can actually explain why that is necessary if that's something that would be good to hear.
Wow.
So it's actually going to Prague, it's in Prague right now, and it's going to be, one of the things it's going to do is it's going to be a particle accelerator, which is pretty cool. So
Yes.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. So I was just curious. You mentioned that it condenses the end of the laser, so like at the very tip of the laser.
And so it compresses the pulse. So for the high powered lasers that we worked on, there were different stages. And it starts with let's see. So it starts off as a pulse that is shorter in duration. And so you start off and you start at low energy and you have a pulse that's short in duration. Then you put it through a stretcher, which actually stretches the pulse. And so you have a longer duration. So it stretches it in time, you have a longer duration. And what that does is it allows you to amplify the pulse and make it higher energy. Because if you're to go through the rest of the system, because this is the very beginning of the laser. So if you're to go through the rest of the system with a higher energy, you're going to burn things, you're going to burn the air even, especially at the focal points. And so it stretches the pulse in time, and then it goes through different amplification stages. So we had different amplification stages. Well, the first set of stages was a set of lasers that we got from another company. And then the second set of amplifiers was actually our babies, which was a split glass amplifier, which the laser would go through and, collect energy.
Okay.
So but if it goes through at the shorter duration, then it's burning. And so at the very end, what you do is you compress the pulse for whatever application you need it for. So at the very end, then you take the pulse and you compress it in time. And so once again, you have a very short pulse. We were actually getting down to femtosecond pulses, which is 10 to the negative 15 seconds.
Wow.
And yeah, and our energy was actually 10 to the 10 to the power of 15. So it's a petawatt. So it was 10 petawatts, but at a very short duration. So yeah, you get this really thick impulse of light is what you end up getting. And it was once a minute shot duration. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it sounds pretty amazing. I just listening, and the thing that I that sounded the coolest to me was that you're able to stretch like the laser. Like you
Yes.
can literally like, change the light.
Yeah, so you're actually
Wow.
stretching it through a series of gratings. And you're
Okay.
compressing it through a series of gratings as well, just in a different, put in a different way.
Yeah. And
To
sure. And just thinking about a career in STEM or a career in an industry like that, what inspired you to get into that? And I imagine that, might be male dominated. And for anybody listening that has ever wanted to get into STEM, might be intimidated by that. So helped you stay motivated to pursue a career like that?
Actually, when I was getting my degree at UT, there was a high power research laser group there. And so I asked to join it as an undergrad research assistant. And that's so I went ahead and did that. And I did that until I graduated from. And so after that, and during that time, light is just so fascinating. Just the different things that you can do with it is just really super intriguing. And so I can give you an example of a really cool thing that light can do if you would like me to do that.
Yeah, that would be amazing to know.
Okay, so there's some of our, so with the different amplification stages, you have lasers that seed into the actual beam that goes through so that you can amplify the pulse. And that's how you get at least part of the amplification stages, is just through other lasers down the chain. And so within like some of the seed lasers, a really cool thing that happened was that the light would start out as infrared light. And then, so you would take the infrared light and you would split it into half and half. And it would go through these two stages, and each of the arms of the laser would go in separate. And one of them would end up being polarized, P polarization, and then S polarization. And that's like horizontal and vertical polarization is a really simple way of thinking about it. And so once these two lasers go through and get these different polarizations, so one actually stays the same polarization as it is, and the other one gets polarized in the opposite direction. And I don't know if opposite would be the best way of putting that in physics terms. But
Uh-huh.
anyway, so then they come back together within a crystal. And what this crystal does is it takes these two, and this is very simple. This is just, doesn't really go into anything. It's just really cool. So it
Mhm.
takes them, and you start with the infrared, and let's say it's 5 joules on in, and so 5 joules in from each of the lengths of the arm. And so it comes out green after the crystal. And it comes out half of the energy that was before, but it takes these two IR infrared links and then creates green light from it through a crystal. And that was just so neat to see that happen.
Yeah,
I
so
so
is the
cool.
technology that you're speaking of, is that like the light or is that the crystal at work?
It's the crystal.
Okay.
There's so many things that crystals could do. All the amplification stages are crystals, and so they're just whatever medium doped with some material. Like a big material. I don't remember the type of crystal off the top of my head, unfortunately, that was used to do that. But like a big glazing medium would be like sapphire, which is titanium doped sapphire. So there's just like a lot of different crystals that are grown and doped with different materials for getting different things that you want. So you can get different bandwidths of the laser, which is different. So a bandwidth would just be like however long, so the different wavelengths. So you have like 1064 to 1085 is a bandwidth of light.
Okay.
So yeah.
I think it's funny how we're talking about crystals and wavelengths in a science term, but like living out in California, you mostly hear crystals and wavelengths in the terms of like how connected you are to the earth or whatever. So I think that's pretty
Yeah, absolutely. My somebody that I used to work with actually always wanted to make a necklace, and when somebody says something about oh, what type of rock is that, or what type of crystal, then say something
interesting.
about, oh, well, it helps to energize light or something like that, and just like is this kind of funny sort of thing, because the two worlds cross at that point, and it's kind of funny.
Absolutely, that would be hilarious, and I wonder if he ever went through with that. That's so funny.
Yeah, he had a lot of projects. He probably did it, but it was amusing to think about.
And earlier you were talking about the accessibility of science and how were you talking about like, creating stories so that people could understand science better, or did you mean to be able to get into a science field?
I mean, just the so the thing is that I see people like I just talked about, and like you said, people just shut down, and so I'm more talking about stuff like creating stories. So that's just one aspect. But I feel that science is super inaccessible, and a lot of people in science also make it super inaccessible because they kind of have this high and mighty air, and they only want to talk in jargon terms, and it makes people who are around not understand, and it makes them feel small. And I've seen so many people shut down. Like if I would say I had a physics degree to somebody and they are doing whatever they're doing and they're like, oh, well, I'm just doing this. And I'm like, no, stop. Don't do that. And so that's just something, it's something that really, it hurts me to see, because it's not as difficult as people think it is. And even I like think about it and I'm like, oh gosh, there's so much and it's so hard and blah, blah, blah. But it's there, and it is, but it's also not. But learning like the basics of science and the things that people don't understand and don't feel like it's too high above them is something that's actually relatively easy to do. But we need to find ways of doing that. We need to find ways of giving information, putting information out there so that people can understand it. And it's something like, it's the same sort of concept like why women have not been in STEM for so long, because we're told you can't do math, you can't do science, and it's the same sort of barrier of entry, and that's so not true at all. We can all do these things, and there are different levels of all things we can do. I know I'm capped out at a certain point. There's a lot of physics that I know I can't do, and that's okay with me, but it's a lot less than one would think. And I think that people need to, scientists need to stop thinking, it's really hard for me to explain, but I come across it time and time again where people just want to speak in these terms and not really help others understand and not take the time, or just say like I'll say, oh, well, that's confusing and it's going to, and I can't give an example of this, but it's just something I've come across, and I say, that's confusing. Why do we do that? Why does it need to be confusing like that for only us to understand? And they're like, oh, well, who cares outside of it? Like, but no, that's not true. It's very important, and especially like everything that's happening now, especially with our environment, like, we really need to step up and understand what we are doing. And the more we understand these things, the more that we'll treat things better. I think. And so I don't know. And people, I don't know. There's just so much to it. Go ahead, sorry.
I can hear where you're coming from in terms of, science being complicated, but also on the flip side, when you're making it, I guess, more accessible, what I took from what you just said is having at least somebody who's able to communicate, that high level, like, complex scientific jargon, but being able to condense that into something that someone else can understand and, find, I guess, value in it. Because all scientists know the value in what they're working on. It's just
Right.
being able to communicate exactly what the world might think is awesome. Yeah. So thanks for being open about that. It sounded like something you're very passionate about in terms of that gap, closing that gap between what scientists, their personalities are like compared to what I guess the world could benefit from.
Yeah, I definitely about that. It's something that I just thought about that I think is helping that. And I can give a really good example of this is information architecture. I think is something that's really helping change that. And a really good piece of information architecture that I saw a couple weeks ago was a a periodic table, but instead of just having all these symbols, and I think it had like symbols and numbers and stuff, but it also had what on earth deals with all of these elements, so that you could like see this element and think, oh well, that has to do with a car. Oh, that has to do with trees. Oh, that's this. Oh, that's that. And I thought that was just such a great piece of information architecture. So I think through that and stuff like that, that it can become more accessible. We just have to find ways of doing it because it's not the simplest of things to do.
Yeah, and information architecture, that sounds like a new term, like an industry term of turning, scientific complex ideas into digestible pieces. And
Well, so can I say something really fast?
yeah, absolutely.
So actually, so information architecture is just whatever information that you want to give, just putting it in a way that makes sense for your audience. So it's not just science, it's anything that you want to see. Just put into like a diagram so that somebody can look at it and understand a concept behind all this information. So you take all this information and you just put it into a diagram or whatever, however, like you feel that would be the best way to show people. Then it helps people understand whatever concept you want. So it's science, it's math, it's design, it's everything you can think of can be done in information architecture.
So it's sort of like infographics, but for things that aren't
Yeah,
statistics.
yeah,
Oh, okay. That's neat.
yeah. It's really cool. I started getting into design a bit after my last job, and so I started learning about information architecture and usability and all the user experience and user interface design. So that's something that I found really intriguing is the information architecture aspect of all of that.
Oh, so that's something that you're still learning and practicing on, or
Yes, actually. Yes, making systems more usable is something else that I'm passionate about actually right now too. Because as I mean, how many times you use a system and all of a sudden you're just so happy about it, right? You're so happy that everything has worked out properly. Very seldomly. And that is why when it happens, you're so excited about it. But most systems, your phone, your apps, internet, most things you do are frustrating things, and everybody gets frustrated, and every little bit of frustration added to somebody's life, it just makes life so much more daunting. So if you can just take away just little frustrations through these means of usability, then I think it's a beautiful thing, because we have so much we're dealing with. We shouldn't have to deal with all these problems when we're just trying to make a phone call, or trying to do just a very simple thing. It should just be a very easy task, but it's not that. And people more and more are starting to hire people for usability so that their systems can be usable. And that's
Mhm.
that's something I'm passionate about, because I think it's spreading love, because the happier you can make people, the less, anxious and frustrated that people are, the more love is out there, and the more love that they want to give, because the capacity is there at that point.
Wow, that's an amazing way to take this concept of technology and the concept of, even, you would think like Lean Six Sigma type stuff, and making it more human in a way.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
great. You gotta hold
yeah.
on to that.
It's beautiful. It really is.
So in terms of systems, are you consulting on that now, or are you
Uh,
developing something?
the only thing I've done with that so far is I actually was, unfortunately, I don't know what has happened with this project, because the person was really busy and has dropped communication, unfortunately. But we were working on a system for emotional intelligence, and that was going to be a tool for people to go in and learn about themselves and different if they are in a certain situation, like how to approach different situations that you can see coming, or situations you've already been in, and approach it with emotional intelligence. And that's something I'm super passionate about as well, as emotional intelligence, because it is I've worked a lot on myself. I used to be a super angry person, and very angry for a very long time, and that's something that I no longer really have. And so I want to spread that, and show people how to become more emotionally mature, because it's so hard, and it's so nice once you can develop these set of skills. So but yeah, that was a little off the track, but yeah, that's the only thing I've worked on so far. But I would like to work on other systems and help them be more usable. But I just have a lot of things going on right now, so I don't know where
Uh-huh.
my life is at this point.
Yeah, and I can totally appreciate, you taking the time to share that story on this podcast, because, that was very open of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you one thing that I would really like people to check out that really helps me with that is Vipassana meditation. It's something I think every human should do. It's Vipassana. I think it is meditation. And it's about acceptance, and accepting everything as it comes. And I don't necessarily, like, there's some philosophies behind it that are not for me, but like the underlying things are just beautiful, and the way you meditate. And they actually hold 10-day silent courses across the world, and they're amazing things to go to. So if anybody gets a chance to go to one of these 10-day silent courses, I highly suggest it. It is one of the most amazing things you can do ever in your life.
Yeah, I have been considering. I was like, wouldn't it be cool to just go to like a Tibet and like meditate for some months? I don't know if that's like
Yeah.
stereotyping, meditating, but yeah,
That's
as you
okay. Do what you need, right?
right. And
Who
I think
cares?
I think this is a great to bounce off of what you were just saying, how it's great. And, even though you didn't take everything away from Vipassana meditation, I've been reading like some spiritual text by a woman named Byron Katie. And she has, even she says that like some of her approach to life isn't for everybody, but, she still loves everybody, regardless of how they believe it. And I think since we're talking about, like science and everything, that to be able to balance yourself out with that other end of the spectrum with even just a couple takeaways, whether it's just meditation or whether it's a little bit more, can be very helpful. And well, not like enlightenment, because that's a whole other deal, but
Yeah, that is a whole nother ballgame. Yeah,
right.
it really is. And something else that Vipassana teaches is empathy and compassion. So it's really big on that. It was Guantanamo Buddha's teaching. So he's the one who came up with the whole process of Vipassana. And yeah, so it really helps you create this whole feeling of compassion for others as well. And that really helped with my anger problems, because a lot of my anger problems were just when people were inconsiderate towards me or even others. Like, it would just drive me crazy. Like, how can you do that? But this has really taught me to just step back and say, you know what? Like, I'm sure you have done the same thing. Somebody's looked at you and said, how can you do that? How can you be so inconsiderate? And also, like, you never know what people are going through. So just like, there's no reason for anger towards others, even if they've been mean to you. There's just, it doesn't help anything. And everything, all your feelings, everything stems from within. Everything comes from within. It's not about this person. It's not about that person. It doesn't matter what anybody's done to you. You and your feelings are all your own. You have control over that.
Wow, that was a
Big
great,
points.
yeah, those are some great points. And so looking at the whole concept of emotional intelligence, and you were saying that you were working on a project that was involved with that in
Right.
terms of building a system. Was it for a school, you said, or?
It was actually a psychologist. So he was going to use it in his practice, at least starting out. So it might have stemmed further from there, but it was a psychologist.
Okay. And on the topic of emotional intelligence, where do you see some gaps that you're working on to fix, I guess? Because if you were working on a project, there must have been, some problem that you had a solution to, right? Or
Where do I see gaps in people in general?
not in general, but like specifically, I guess, in the areas that you wanted to fix.
I mean, it was a very generalized thing. So anger is something that because that's something I really dealt with. So anger is definitely the biggest thing for me, because it's just so common just to see you're just driving around and people are just acting very angry towards you for no reason,
Right. All
or
over.
just, yeah, there's just so much anger in this world, and because of everything that's going on, it just increases. And I think that also, like, the things that we place our values on, and a lot of it's materialistic. And I think that when you have like these materialistic values placed in society, and people aren't able to obtain these things that they really supposedly need to have, otherwise you aren't this or you aren't that. If you don't have this nice car, then you're worthless. If you don't have this nice house, and you're worthless, what are you doing? And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. And I think that once that's accepted, that people can really just live their lives, and these things are really not important. Like, you don't need the newest things. You just need to live and do what makes you happy. And that's a big part of it. And also something like the whole people look down on people for certain jobs. And I think people need to just stop looking down on others and stop making fun of others, and just let people dress how they want. Let people wear what they, just be who they want to be. Let people have the jobs they want to have. As long as you're not hurting anybody, why does anybody care what others are doing? And I think that just needs to end. And I don't see an end to it. But and I think that when people are just lashing out and being mean to others, there's always just something just nasty within themselves that they can't get rid of. And so it comes out in these really nasty ways towards others. And right now, like, if you can hear, my voice is breaking because it breaks my heart to see these things. Because this world just doesn't need that. It's just hard enough to exist. That we just need to be loved to each other. That's it. That's a big thing I want, is just to spread love to others. Smile at somebody, say hi, and just be kind. So that's emotional intelligence. Yeah, like it runs the gamut. Like, there are just so many things, but anger is my biggest one, because that's the most common that I see. So
Thank you. And you brought up so many great points. The materialism, and then it's looking down on people, and maybe even looking up to people and being angry that you're not there yet.
absolutely, that is absolutely another thing, for sure, for sure.
And when I asked about the gaps, I think you almost revealed some of them here. Like, what are the conversations that need to be had, and what are what are some of the causes? I mean, you think about road rage, but how do you reduce road rage, right? And then, things like that.
One person at a time, hopefully through just tips and tools that you learn throughout time, I think is really the only way, because I don't really see the world changing as a whole, and so it's just up to the individual to desire it, because I desired it so hard. I hated being angry, and so I worked so hard on myself, and doing the Vipassana courses is the biggest part of my release of anger. There are a lot of other things that worked, and I can't really tell you right now what they were because I can't think of them. That was the biggest
That's
part,
fine.
though. But yeah, so it's up to the individual. If we could possibly change what society values, then that's great, and stop being mean to each other. But really, all of that is just one person at a time, and we all just have to want to desire it. And I do see, it seems like I do see more and more people wanting this and desiring this and doing these things to help. And I think the internet allows people to see everything that's going on, and see the bigger picture, and see maybe what needs to happen overall and then within themselves. And so through that, but it also creates more anger too. So it's really a strange sort of thing. You just one person at a time. I'm gonna go back to that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's great. And I think now is like a good time. Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think this is an absolute like good time to tie everything together because you
Okay.
were talking, you shared your experience and that was so powerful and how you can tell how that had helped build passion in you to, spread love and to, work on help others work on emotional intelligence. And I think that a lot of difficulty is, and this is something I've experienced, like you could tell me things and yeah, of course, I'll think about it. And, even I think to an extent to where even though I've thought about it so many times that I feel like I've already done it, even though I've never taken the action, you know,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah. So like I do a lot of marketing and then like I'll read marketing concepts and I'll think about it so much to the point where, I've already created the scenario of whether it works or not. And then it's like, okay, but that's not reality, right? It's all in
Right.
my mind.
I understand that actually now that you're saying that.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And I guess to wrap this up, in that sense, to tell people, okay, try Vishapana or
Vipassana,
to
yeah.
sorry, one more time.
Vipassana?
Vipassana or to, not be angry or to recognize that materialism isn't all that it's cut out to be. What would you say was like a specific action that you had taken during the change for you? Was it only Vipassana meditation or was there like, some other activity that you did? Because, and what I'm getting at is what is like one action that everybody can take today? Is it like reflection or is it to just go do a meditation class or like, what do you think was a game changer for you?
So I say if you have a Vipassana center around, do that if you can. Absolutely 100% just do it. That's a really wonderful thing to do. But so something I took away from that, so I've done it twice. And the second time, I took more away from it than the first time. And because I was more diligent of a student, because the schedule's pretty rough, actually. Because you meditate, I think you wake up at like, is it 4:30 or something like that in the morning and you meditate for 3 hours, but not a lot of people do that. So if you go to Vipassana, try to be a diligent student for one thing. But
Mhm.
so something I took away from being such a diligent student the last time I went was when you feel upset or anxious, hurt, whatever, stop and think about like what is going on in your system. Is your heart beating fast? Do you feel pressure somewhere? Do you feel heat? Do you feel cold? Do you feel pain? And a lot of times, especially with anger, I found out if I was on the road and all of a sudden somebody made me angry, I would say, okay, what do I feel right now? And then I'm thinking about how I'm feeling and what's going on inside of me. And all of a sudden, I'm not angry anymore. That's gone. And
Wow.
I'm just concentrating like on myself and feeling that in myself. And so that's something that I really think that people can do. And that's something, so it's not only with that and feeling what's in yourself, but if you're actually talking to somebody and all of a sudden they anger you for some reason, if you can just step back and think about what they said and like just be logical about it instead of being emotional about it. That's another thing is I'm trying, and it's real hard because I'm an emotional creature. I wear my heart on my sleeve. Everybody knows how I'm feeling. Not so much anymore because now I've realized that logic should really prevail instead of emotions, because emotions will lead you astray because they're instantaneous, and it could be caused by some trauma that you felt, something that's happened in your past. And so if you can step back for a moment instead of reacting immediately, like don't react and think about it logically, or even just step back for a moment and take a breath, that moment can really create wondrous things in any relationship. If you have problems, just stop for a second. That's just try to do that. And something that I also really want to do is I never want to fight with anybody ever again. I mean, arguments are different because sometimes arguments happen, and
Hmm.
arguments can be like across the board. It's not even out of anger necessarily, but something else is just like there's no reason to fight with another. There's just no reason for it. So just try to just maintain a balanced perspective and just, just try to be calm and relax as much as possible and logical about things.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that is quite an that is quite a ambitious goal to never fight again. Wow.
Oh yes, it really is. But so far, so good.
Yeah, if only.
And I've encountered things where, man, it was hard, but gosh, I got through it. And man, after those encounters and just seeing the difference in the encounters and the way that they were played out in the end, there's just the outcomes are so much better because it doesn't do anything to fight. It accomplishes nothing.
Mhm.
It really like almost never accomplishes anything. You can just talk things out. So it's
There you
hard,
go.
but still worth it if possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time, April. I wish you the best in everything you're doing, and really appreciate you being so open on this podcast and being able to share things about yourself like that.
Thank you for having me, and good luck with all your endeavors. I know there are many.
Yeah,
Yes.
and on top of Miscreation Nation, what do you have anything else you wanted to share? Do you have like another website or anything?
Not right now. I do
Cool.
not. But yeah, I have future plans for all sorts of different things. We'll see what takes hold at this moment. I just moved states, and it's been a whirlwind right now for my life. So I'm just trying to settle down and see what's up with my life and what's happening right now. So
Great. Well, it
yeah.
sounds like a lot of it's coming together. Your expertise with logical element of the systems and everything, but also bringing that human element to everything. I mean, it sounds like it's all coming together. So you look forward to seeing how you put it all together in the future. Wishing you the best on it. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on this, and everybody else, audience, thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.
Yes, have a lovely day, guys.
Bye.